Hey everyone, Jay with Mobile Home Partners here, doing another interview here. We got Brandon Diaz. Are you Spanish, by the way, Brandon? You speak Spanish?
Yeah, I'm half Mexican, half American. And I speak terrible Spanish, but I do speak Spanish. My fiance, she's Mexican. She speaks full Spanish, so I'm learning a little bit better on my Spanish side. But yes, I do
Okay.
have Spanish blood. Yes.
Nice, nice. Okay. Well, we'll keep it in English on this video anyway, but I was just curious. So you are a real estate investor and very successful. I've heard you speak many times and, had me blown away. So how's the business right now? Biggest thing with COVID?
It's going good. I mean, there was a bit of a transition from the very beginning, obviously, when it was first popping off. But we decided not to slow down. We decided to keep going, mainly for purposes other than ourselves. It was more or less, focusing on, we have a business where we've got 7 people that work for us in our crew, making sure that they're being employed.
Sure.
So that was actually a main component that we actually decided to keep going, was just for them. But there's other aspects of like lenders, and also just, the market doesn't want you to slow down. When I'm talking about the market, I'm talking about your own individual local cities, your neighborhoods and all that, where you're renovating these houses and you're taking a dilapidated property and you're fixing it up. If you're slowing down, then you're slowing down the progress of fixing up an entire neighborhood, city, an entire nation on that side. So one of the things that we decided, very early on, is we made the decision that regardless of what COVID was doing, that we were going to continue our process, even if that meant no profit for us as the business owners. And when I talk about the business owners, I got one other partner, and my fiance is also a business partner as well. So there's really 3 of us running together. All of us it's a family-owned business, so we're all related. And so we made the decision, even if it meant that we personally weren't making profit, that we were financially stable, we have our own investments, and that way we didn't lose the speed and the momentum of our business because of this. But we kind of had this idea that that we didn't need to slow down, even if that was the case. Like, even if it meant that we weren't going to be profitable, the reality of it is we thought we were going to be profitable. And luckily we didn't slow down. We actually grew during this period of time.
Wow. Okay. Second investor I've heard say that. Okay, my business did slow down a little bit, but I've heard that already. So for people who don't know who Brandon is, what do you do exactly in investing, real estate?
Okay, so I've been investing in real estate since 2010. I got out of the military 2008. So 2004 to 2008, I was in the United States Marine Corps. I was infantry. So I got out, couldn't really find anything as far as work capacity because of the recession during the 2008 crash. And being infantry, the only thing that really translates to anything is really security, law enforcement, that type of nature. But the jobs just weren't there. So I got started in 2010. I started off in wholesaling of real estate. My very first year in the business in 2010 transitioned to 2011. I picked up 14 single family homes, a triplex apartment, all owner finance, creative financing structure, no money down, stretched over 3 different cities. From there in 2012, I started going on the legacy Rich Dad education circuit, all the way from working, but I was still doing my wholesale creative financing. Really started amping up really back in like 2014, 2015, where we were just doing an array of different types of stuff, all the way from mobile homes, all the way from wholesaling, fix and flips, but like larger renovation type fix and flips. And now we're in the business where we've ramped down on the wholesaling. We do less of the wholesaling and more of the fix and flips. In traditional past, we'll typically do somewhere between, and it varies year to year, and I really don't actually keep count, but it varies about 25-ish plus or minus transactions per year. And before it was a 25-ish of like wholesale sprinkled in with creative financing, fix and flips and all that. Now we're looking at more like probably 25-ish actual fix and flips, and probably sprinkled in maybe another like 5 to 10-ish, maybe 10-ish of a wholesale transactions. And then we'll probably, do some creative financing deals and maybe pick up a few properties this year and hold them in our portfolio. So we're actually looking at ramping up, but we're doing more of the fix and flips more than ever at this point.
Okay. You said a couple of things there I want to touch on. So yeah, I have a lot of students that I coach on mobile home investing, and with mobile homes already, there's a stigma, but there's with wholesaling. Well, wholesaling for beginners. I tell people, wholesaling to me, I actually didn't start out wholesaling. That was something that I did later on. That's just the way I started. But I say to them as wholesaling, you never leave behind, because no matter if you're an investor,
That's right.
you're going to get deals that you may just not like for whatever reason. So instead of telling a seller no, why don't you pass it on to another investor, another buyer, and make something out of it? So wholesaling is something that stays with you forever. But so you can get into real estate without money. I heard you say that. Elaborate on that a little bit. That's another thing still. I don't have any money, connections, network, but how do you do it?
So I like to pride myself in like being a creative financing, like real estate investor. So a lot of the transactions that we're doing are very little to no money involved in it at all. Doesn't mean that we don't deploy our own capital and invest our own money as well. But, a business needs to start having this cognitive thinking of like, how do I get into a transaction with no money? And there's many different ways of doing that, all the way from partnerships is just one way, where you joint venture and you bring in a partner that has money and they fork out for the transaction and they do the deal with their money. Well, that's not your money, that's someone else's money, but it allows you to be able to make money in that direction. That's just one example there. All the way to like creative financing, like straight through the sellers, all the way from wholesale techniques. Now you always have like your small expenditure type money that you'll spend on like marketing and advertising and all that. But either you're going to spend either money or you're going to spend your own equity, your own time. And in some cases you'll spend both. All right. But if you don't have money, let's say that that's out of the equation, then you need to look at it more like the same as like what you would do as far as like, you could fix up a property and not have a crew or not have contractors or anything like that. And you could save a ton of money, but you're going to spend a lot more time on that transaction before you make the money. All right. Well, you can say the same aspect when it comes down to your business. Whenever you're doing like, let's say you don't have a lot of money and you don't even really have a lot of money for marketing and advertising to do a wholesale transaction. Well, the cognitive thinking is, well, how do I find deals? How do I do that? And then I spend my own time. And then there's more of you almost create equity within your own business, and you're creating equity with leads and creating equity with marketing on that direction. And that's another way of doing it as well. So there's a lot of ways to actually do no money down transactions. It's really studying and thinking of the cognitive ways of like getting the wheels turning on how do you make it a no money down deal. And we do that constantly. So like I'm actually training an acquisitions person right now, which is also my fiance's sister. And she came over and I'm showing her how to run a comp, who's selling to who, what exactly am I looking for? I'm showing my formula because I'm trying to train her to like replace me not having to go and look at every single property to negotiate a property. So I'm in the phasing of that. And I'm closing on a property. It should have been today that we should have closed on it, but because of like, they have to get a release of lien from a creditor, it's probably going to be actually next week before we close. But I called up a lender and I said, okay, so I've got the contract for $24,000. The rehab cost is around $20,000. I'm going to have a closing cost initially about $1,500. I'm going to borrow, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was like $47,000. And I'm going to show, and I said, I want you to listen to the phone call. And she goes, well, are they going to ask like detailed questions? I said, they may ask, some questions. It kind of just depends on the lender. Just kind of depends on what's going on. And then I called this lender and said, hey, I've got this property. I'm willing to give you 2 points down and 12% on the transaction. The property's worth $70,000. I already sent her the email of the comps and the rehab and the pictures and everything else. And I said, are you good? Are you good on lending? And she was like, absolutely. When do you want the money sent? And I'm like, well, right now we're still working with the title company and everything else. And I got off the phone and after I got off the phone, the conversation was only like 3-4 minutes with this lender, by the way. Okay. It was like only like 3 or 4 minutes. And then I went over to to the person I'm training. And I said, they're lending for me to fix up the property. They're lending me to buy the property. They're lending me everything in order for me to do the transaction. And she says, how did you do that? And I said, well, I speak money. Like when a person has money, they know that a person that understands money, there's a universal conversation, like the same as like you may speak English or Spanish or something like that. I learned the ways of speaking money in the form of real estate. And then I translate to the people that have money. and then they feel comfortable lending me the money, and then I'll do the transaction. Now, in that case, I'll still have money probably invested into this property, but in this case, I may only have invested probably around like, there's going to be holding costs, utility costs, there'll be insurance payments, things of that nature. But by the time I'm done with this, I'll probably, and there may be some overages on the renovation as well. So there's always maybe that, but I'll probably only have like, at the end of this, probably only about $4,000 invested into this property. And if I did have $4,000 at the end of it, I may actually pop like somewhere between $15,000 and $18,000 is what my exit net profit would be on the transaction. So even if I invested $4,000, I turn that into, let's say, low end $15,000. Well, a lot of people get excited just to double their money. You know, if they were to buy a car and flip their car, and they bought it for $4,000 and sold it for $8,000, they'd be like, that's a solid deal. Well, I'm taking my $4,000 and turning into $15,000, $18,000. Okay.
Nice.
So that's little money that I'm actually investing, but there is the potential that if we run everything right and we reduce the cost during the rehab, that I have no money involved in it. And then I make $15,000, $18,000 with no money involved into that. Okay. So it's like, it's processing these numbers, it's processing the transaction, understanding the money game itself within real estate. And that's how you'll start learning to do no money down deals, all the way from wholesale, creative financing, partnerships, the likes, so forth, so forth, so forth.
Very nice. No, I like a lot of good points on there. I like that. You speak money, you know, that makes sense. I call a lot, again, I'm mobile home investing, so I deal with different type of real estate here, but I call a lot of them mobile home park owners and park managers. And that's one thing that a student says, well, what do you say to them? Maybe that's what I should say, is you just got to speak their language, you know,
Exactly.
make it feel they need you, you know, in some ways. So that's good. So you tell us, obviously, from the landing point, what you can do structure there. What is your typical deal on a single family real estate?
Okay, so okay, so I have a bunch of niches that I'm in, but the one that I've lately been talking about is 2 specific niches that I'm in. Over here in Memphis, Tennessee, we have a medium price home, roughly around $110,000 is roughly our medium price home here. Okay. But that means that we could get properties all the way down where the ARVs are like $60,000. Okay. Now a $60,000 house, that means that I got to pick it up at $20,000. I'll probably typically put like 20,000 into it, and it's worth like $60,000. And then we have our prices above the median price home as well. So typically the 2 niches that I'm in are going to be where houses are either worth more than $110,000. These houses are typically the ones that I'm focusing on these neighborhoods. They're focusing like the price range is around $110,000 to about $200,000, $225,000, floating in that price range. Typically, those houses are more like what some people will call them either transitional neighborhoods, or they'll call them emerging markets, where you have like a little sub-market where on one side of the street, the houses are priced really high, and then you have like more suppressed prices on one side of the street. But because of these prices here, what they're doing is they're overflowing and they're starting to come up, and they're almost expanding. They're almost expanding like this neighborhood that's typically at these prices. They're expanding it into this neighborhood, and these prices will eventually at some point in time be equal in par to these houses. But that's like a 10-year process or so before that happens. Those houses, like in my area that I've discovered, those are the houses that I'm typically dealing with. Like those, they're like old, like 1920s, 1910s. They're like the bungalow style houses. Problem is they need large renovations, like $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in renovation, but I can pick those up for like 20, 30, 40 grand. I put basically 60 into it, and then I go around and I sell it for 130, 150, 170, $200,000. Some of them a little bit more expensive. Like one I picked up for 70,000, we put 65,000 into it. So we're like worth 100, we're into it for 130, but it's worth like 200 grand. Okay. That's one niche that I'm in, where I'll specifically focus on neighborhoods that are just like that. Okay.
Tell me on those. What is the average rehab hold on that? 2 months?
Yeah, typically. So right now our crews are getting better and better and better and better and better. So we're actually getting to more of a systematic like approach to these rehabs to get them done as fast as possible. because the one thing that costs you the most money on a rehab is actually holding the project. Because even if there's no one working on the house at all, you still have insurance costs. You still have your holding cost. If you have interest, like if you're borrowing from somebody, you have your interest payment, all the way from the utilities still cost money. So you're losing money every single day. So what we're doing is we're using the same colors on each house, all the way from exterior colors, interior colors. We're systemizing the idea of how to be able to rehab a house altogether. So one that we just did, it was a $60,000 renovation. It was 65 to be exact. We had the crew on the house for 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And they were on it just to kind of initially prep it and get it ready to finish. But then what we did, so there was like gutting and basically demolition work, just kind of prepping it all on the outside, so forth. And then what I did was I took the crew and took them on another project where they finished out that project. Meanwhile, I have my my subs out, like my electricians, roofers, everybody else that we sub the property out to. They were working on the property during that period of time. And then there was a brief hold because my crew was working on another project, and we brought them back, and then they finished it in 4 weeks. So it was actually the actual work on the project without the subs was about a 6-week renovation on a $65,000 renovation on that side. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. We got one done. We picked it up for $30,000. It was really, electricity was already on, because that's what slows you down the most, is like your utility, like, getting your inspections and everything else. So that will have a pause in the project itself. So then you would, if you were to say, how long did it take for you to buy it? And then by the time you got it renovated, then I would say it was like a 3-month process, but it wasn't a 3-month rehab. It was a 6-week rehab. It just was a 3-month time frame for that particular house. Like another house that we picked up for 30 grand. Now this is the other niche that I'm in, and I'll get into that in a second, but it only needed $19,000 in repairs, and we got that done in 8 days. Now that was 5 working days. That was 1 week of 5 days. And then it rolled over into the Wednesday, and then we were completed on a Wednesday. So if you looked at it, you would say, well, that's actually like 2 weeks. It's like 2 weeks, but it was actually 8 working days of actual work to get that completed. Okay. So we're getting faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. So it kind of depends on how you're asking that question, and what regard. Are you talking the full length of start to finish, or are you talking renovation aspect of it?
Renovation, yeah. No, that's good. And I'm gonna have a question for you towards the end on contractors, but tell us about this other niche you're in.
So so typically I've noticed that the 110,000 and above, like those 200,000, those are typically those transitional neighborhoods that I was telling you about. But it's not so definitive on that aspect. Let me just say that. But that's just a general idea of it. And another niche that I'm in is turnkey rentals, where for about 60,000 to around 110,000, and it goes past this as well. What I'll do is I'll actually fix up a property, and we'll put brand new roofs on it. And every house that we renovate, we put brand new roofs. We tear off. We don't double layer. We put brand new roofs. Architectural shingles, all the way from HVAC systems, brand new HVAC systems, not used, making sure electricity is good, putting new water heaters in, putting nice floors down that are like going to be scratch resistant, waterproof resistant, so forth and so forth. And what we'll do is we'll make it a solid tank of basically a rental, and then I'll sell it to another investor out of state that lives in like California, lives in New York, lives in Florida, these coastal markets that can't believe that they can buy a property for, let's say, $60, $70, $80, $100,000, and that can rent out at $700, $800, $900, $1,000 in rent. And what we'll do is we'll put professional property management onto the property. So it's a turnkey process for them. My goal is to find the property, I renovate it, and then we make the profit off of basically providing the service in the market. And then they can put 20% down. They can get a conventional loan, put 20% down, and then everything is handled for them. They do third-party inspections on the property. They get to be true investors is the whole point on that side. And then they get the returns that they're looking for. And that's another like niche that I'm in. And those price points are typically between like 60,000 to 110,000. But I've got one right now that we'll probably do that's about 180,000. It's worth 180,000, but it rents out for like $1,500 a month. But we're talking, this house is a Mac Daddy 2,400 square foot house. It's 5 bedroom, 3 bath. It's going to have granite countertops. someone's going to want to have it in their rental portfolio for sure. So it's not so definitive on like the 110,000 and below. So just to add that in there, but that's an idea of the two niches that I'm in. One is like these transitional neighborhoods. The other one is in rental, like turnkey rental styles. Okay. So I hope that answers your question there.
Absolutely. And I just realized I didn't allocate enough time to talk to you. I want to keep you here for a couple more hours.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Freaking awesome. Yes, sir. So, I've been mobile home investor full time. That's what I do. But duplexes, triplexes, that's something that in real estate has always caught my attention. I don't know why, just I guess multiple family kind of thing. Even the whole typical buy one, live on one side, rent the other, and pay for yourself kind of thing. But they're interesting to me. And my goal is to get into apartment complexes. You're in that as well, apartments, right? Tell us about that a little bit and the difference between that and your single ordinary real estate.
Well, on that, there's actually a lot of similarities. The good thing about having it like as an apartment building is that it's all under one structure. It's all under one roof. So like some of the challenges that we have with some of these $60,000 to $70,000, $80,000 houses or just the turnkey rentals is that, I mean, if you're looking at an apartment, they kind of correlate very closely to that, but just on a multiple scale, and you have, smaller units. The problem that we've been facing is like, whenever you're trying to systematically get your like rehabs faster, that means I've got to find more deals. So if I'm getting a house done in 8 days, that means that in a month, if I'm going to keep my crew working, I've got to find 4 houses that meet that parameter within just that 1 month. And a month goes by very, very, very quickly. Okay. So then if I'm looking at on that direction, if we got 12 months in a year, that right there is 48 flips just off of that alone throughout the year. So we sprinkle them. And we sprinkle some of the larger transactions. So we'll do ones that are heavier, and then we'll also do some that are a little bit easier to deal with. But having an apartment complex, what I can do is if I'm having I'm looking at a 12 unit, we're looking at doing a 12 unit apartment complex now. The project, I can already tell you, is probably going to take us like 6 months to maybe even 8 months to complete the entire project itself. It's small numbers, probably invest something like $300,000 in the transaction. But on that property, like the good thing is I'm establishing work for my crew for the next 6 months, 7, 8, and it's all on one location. I don't have to like worry about floating them around. But the other side to that is like, we have to make sure that like, then there's the time value of money that also occurs as well. So if I put my people onto an apartment complex, there's really maybe no revenue depending on the apartment complex. Some of them may be like, where they're in a situation where you can rent them out as you finish them out, but that's not this project. This project is going to be it's basically going to be one swoop at a time, meaning you're completing your drywall all in one time. You're completing your electrical and your plumbing, and then it'll be 100%. It's 0% vacant. I mean, it's 0% occupied right now, so 100% vacant. And then it'll turn into an availability where it's all available, and then it'll slowly get filled in. But like a project like that, the challenge is, just being frank, is like there's no money being brought in for the next 6 to 8 months. So then should I focus on ones that I can get done in like 8 days? Just go ahead and flip, make money off of that. But again, I have to find X amount of them all the time. Or I give my team enough work to do, and then we make a big chunk on the back end of it. And on that side, we're probably going to be making, probably $150,000. I see a profit margin about right now about $150,000, maybe even plus on that transaction. So then instead of making $15,000 on one, can I just go ahead and make $150,000, but I wait out 6-8 months? Those are the things that we think about. And those are kind of the key differences. Like a lot of people are just so definitive in one or the other. Like, no, apartment complexes are absolutely the best. Or they'll say like single family homes are absolutely the worst or the best or whatever the case is. We don't play that. Okay. We play that. Okay. Like we look at the market and we look at our cities and we look at our communities and our neighborhoods, and we're trying to just renovate them. We're trying to provide a service in the market, but ultimately we have to be a profitable business. So then I look at my crews. I look at what we're trying to do as a goal for our teams, for ourselves as partnerships and as a company itself. And then we also look at, okay, the deployment of time value of money and also learning capacity. Do we want to take on this transaction because we want to learn, but it's going to be a little bit hard of a transaction and we may make a little bit of profit, but maybe not as much as we think? Or do we just want to be profitable, like massively profitable? And we're always balancing that actually. So there's but ultimately it has to be profitable in that direction. But we're really focusing on like the balancing all of this at the same time, just as individuals, as in a company.
Yeah, no, that's freaking awesome. Okay. Which do you prefer? I know you say you do both. Real estate, single family, or apartments? Apartments, they sound attractive.
Okay, so I'm always I go to sleep at night, and I always, man, I'll flop in the morning. I'll go to sleep one night with one idea, and then I'll wake up with a completely different idea the very next day. So I will say that. And I'm really battling that right now currently. All right. So I'm really battling, the whole direction. Which one do I want to do? I don't have a real good answer for that, because literally, I mean, I'll give you an answer right now, and then it's a videotaped, and the next time I talk to somebody, it's a completely different answer, because I literally change from 1 minute.
I think you froze up on me there for a second.
Hey, bud.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I lost you there for a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, no, it's understandable. I mean, that's part of. I mean, and I guess part of that would also be, how good of a deal many times you haven't said. Maybe I want to stick to this a little bit more than the other, and have to feel the way around the same. But definitely not closing. Being limiting yourself. That's huge. I like that. So let's get into mobile homes. That's more my niche now. What are your thoughts on mobile homes?
High rates of returns. I mean, like a lot of the mobile homes that I did in the past, I wasn't getting an ROI less than 50%, like a cash on cash return on investment of around 50%. I mean, you can't beat that number at all. I mean, those are stupid deals right there. So I heard you guys saying the other day, little ATMs that spit out cash. I call them little ATMs that puke out money. That's what I say. Okay. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So but the challenges is with the mobile homes is more of the bank financing aspect, whereas like a single family home, you have a little bit easier bank financeability on some of them. And that's really kind of what transitioned us more into the single family home, was more of the scalability because of the bank being able to be a part of that. Hard money lenders are a little tougher on the mobile home aspect. Private lenders, so you have to really go with your own personal funds, private lending, or seller financing in a lot of different directions on that side. But I mean, the problem with even getting like involved with those is that your margins are already like the profit margin is really high, but if there's partners involved, it really sucks up too much of the profit in order to get anybody involved. So the scalability sometimes can be a little difficult. Now, not to say that you can't scale. There's plenty of people that I know that have just absolutely blown it out of the water. But that was one of the challenges that I was personally having, was the scalability of growth on that direction. So that's what got me more into the single family home, was just because there was an availability of bank financing, lending from hard money lenders and everything else. And it just kind of grew on that direction. But as far as like getting started and getting yourself involved into mobile homes, like there's nothing wrong with that. And it's my very first hold property was a 1968 Buddy. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It was a 10-foot by 12-foot trailer. And I mean, this thing was a piece of junk that I purchased for $4,000. And I remember I rented it out at like $450 a month, but the lot rent was only like $100 a month, something like that. And then my taxes were something like, my insurance was like $40. And then in the state of Tennessee, the landowner pays the property taxes, and there's no like registration fee either on that side. So I remember I was cash flowing on a $4,000 investment. So I can't remember the exact number, but it was like $280 or something like that on this little, and let me say this, I later found out that the $4,000 that I spent on this was way too much in the first place. Like I overpaid on that mobile home by like probably threefold. I probably overpaid on it. Okay. So I actually could have got it a lot less. But I remember it was a great experience. It allowed me to get started in the business. In the mobile home park, there was only 3 mobile homes in the entire park. At one point in time, there was like 30 of them at one point, and then had reduced itself down to 3. And I ended up buying another one in that park, ended up picking it up for like $5,000 and sold it for like $15,000. Like didn't even fix it up, just literally just turned around and sold it for $15,000. Made like $10,000 on that mobile home. And I remember just feeling that portion of success when I first got into mobile homes, which led me to just getting more confident. And then I started owning more mobile homes during that period of time. And then it just was a stepping stone. And then next thing I know, I'm fixing and flipping houses and now apartments and so forth. Now I do multiple transactions. So like, I really contribute mobile homes to helping that development on that direction more than anything else. We could talk about the numbers, and there's a lot of significant things that we could talk about as far as a return on investment, but also just the significance of like, if a person has just a little bit of money and they're a little bit worried, give yourself a shot in a mobile home. Allow yourself to like get, even if you get punched in the mouth, like give yourself the ability to just like
less risk.
started and understand and like get that confidence to get to another one and another one. And then next thing you know, you go 10 years down the road and you look back and you're like, man, I remember when I bought a 1968 Buddy and I overpaid for that thing. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole goal in the first place. So I'm a big fan of mobile homes, less of the ROI, because the ROIs are great. Certainly we could talk about that, but everybody talks about that. But just the aspect of just getting someone started, that's really probably the more significant thing that people need to actually be talking about.
Yes, I would definitely suggest on that. As mobile homes, I think is definitely the way to start, especially trying to learn even just from rehab, working with people, working with contractors, sellers. Absolutely gives you that. And again, it's less the risk. I mean, the numbers you're talking about there, you know, I share mine pretty open as well. And 5,000 is usually what I have all in into a mobile home. So that means, you know, that's holding costs, contractors, everything, 5,000. These same 5,000 properties, I'm flipping them from 20, 25,000. And if I'm financing, that's the beauty of, you know, it's the downside. The banks don't lend on mobile homes. And I know that firsthand. Before knowing that they did, I called hundreds of banks. No, they would not, especially if it's in a mobile home park. Forget about it. It's too old. It's, you know, no security to them. I had to understand that. So I had to start with private money lending. And, you know, that's how I got my first, you know, but it did open the doors to the fact that I can finance the people. You know, when I go to sell one of this for 20, 25,000, same problem I had, they have. Rehab or not, the bank's not going to loan on that mobile home. So I get to be the bank. At this point, I finance them for them, so it benefits me in a way. But yeah, definitely getting started, you know, it's all around. I mean, less risk, less money, less everything. Absolutely.
And you brought up a lot of key points there. I mean, because it's easier for a lender, a private lender, especially because when I got first started in mobile homes, I was 24 years old. Okay. And at the age of 24, I didn't know anything about real estate. I was just brand new. I was studying my tail end off, trying to learn everything I could. But I had a lot more lenders that were they would be high net worth individuals, but they were willing to play the risk on me with a $5,000 investment on a you know, an ability to make like a 10 to a 12, 8%, 10%, 12% interest rate on a $5,000 investment, than an $80,000, $120,000, $150,000 investment on like a fix and flip that I would only be holding for, let's say, 6 months. They were willing to do that. So then it gave me the opportunity to at least build a relationship. So start the relationship, start the conversation on small numbers, but also gave me experience with small numbers as well. Like just like you're talking about, you're dealing with contractors, you're dealing with all the same things as you would like on a renovation of a $200,000 house, because your numbers are going to be extremely tight because you want to be into it for $5,000. You may be picking this thing up at $1,000, $2,000, and like you've got to fix up the entire house for like $2,500. That's an art. It's an art to be able to do something like that. And then you got to work with every single crew member. You got to make sure you're on budget, making sure you're on task. And then you feel like once you get into $5,500, you feel like you failed. And you're like, man, I've over renovated this thing. And then you see your ROI number just drop like crazy. Well, then you learn from that. I talked to a guy in North Carolina. He had bought like a whole like subdivision of just junk properties. And I asked him, I said, and I mean, we're talking like junk properties. And he was talking to me. And I was like, have you ever done a fix and flip before? And then he just kind of said, like in this arrogant, like non-humble way, he was like, nope. Like as if he's just going to just jump in. I mean, we're talking, he's probably going to invest somewhere between like $500,000 to $700,000 on these single family homes. And he has no experience whatsoever. I hope he does well. Okay. But like, don't act arrogant about it at the very beginning. You want to be humble if that's going to be the case and be like, man, I'm willing to listen and learn from anybody that possibly could. He wasn't even willing to listen to me. He was just wanting to do it. Okay. And I never talked to him afterwards, but I always remember that just that arrogant like conversation that we had. And I'm like, dude, you're sitting there, you were talking to someone that's flipped hundreds of homes, and you didn't even want to pick my brain in any kind of way. Well, if I was to give him any kind of advice at the very beginning, like I don't suggest people do that, not even the slightest. Just go out there and just invest $500,000, $700,000. Sure, he's got the backing, but not all of us do. And if you're getting first started off, you may not have that type of backing. You may have the backing of maybe $5,000 if you're lucky, Well, get into a mobile home. It gives you the ability of gaining the same type of experience as some idiot in North Carolina trying to invest $507,000, but you have a chance of only losing probably $500 out of that situation. He has the chance of losing several $100,000 and look like a straight idiot out of all of that, okay? And that's a good point that you just brought up there.
Beautiful. Absolutely. Yes, sir. Stay humble. Always learn. You always educate yourself. Yeah. I had to learn that a lot too, trying to do a lot of try and error. I got it. You know, the question you don't ask is a question you may need. So trickling down on time, but contractors, you know, that is huge. And I hear that a lot with real estate and same with mobile homes. Contractors, a handyman, they're so hard to work with. I dealt with that starting out. And once I got me a crew, it was like, you know, I kept them and just kind of stuck with them. But what do you find challenging with contractors? You seem to have quite a bit here.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right, your contractor is going to, there's many things that's going to help you like grow as a business. And a contractor on your team is definitely that guy. And over the years, I mean, we've had the battles of contractors and crew members and everybody else, okay? Like everybody else that complains about them, I've also complained. But when I find them, when you know, and you keep them, okay? And you keep them and you make sure that they're working. You want to start small. You want to make sure that they're, okay, there's a couple things that I'm looking for. Now, this isn't definitive, but the things that I'm starting to learn here, okay? Once you get to someone that has like 10 years where they've been in the business for like 10 years, 15 years, 20 years as a contractor, they're charging too much. That's one problem that I've noticed, okay? Like they're typically only doing projects in like the suburbs where they could get insurance payouts and they're getting fortunes of money. Well, I've noticed like you typically have, you got to break this down where you have like material costs, labor costs for the crew. It's typically what I see is about a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every dollar I spend in material, labor is typically plus or minus depending, okay? It's typically like a 1-to-1 ratio. And then you have a contractor on the side of that. Well, how much are they charging on top of what it costs for material and labor? And a lot of times contractors will mask that underneath one big like plop of, well, I'll do the renovation for X amount, okay? Well, your suburb people will typically go 1-to-1 ratio with material labor. And what I've noticed is they'll typically do whatever that is, they'll do a 1-to-1 ratio with that. So nearly 100% markup. So let's say that you had your own crew and you had your own material and you were contracting out yourself. And let's say it costs $10,000 to renovate something. Then they're going to want to make as a contractor $10,000. So they're charging you $20,000. Well, it's hard to have a business like that. Typically, your business people that have been around for like 5 years or something like that, 5 to 7 years, that really understand it, have a strong background in construction. They've done a lot of like renovations. They're typically going about 50% of that. So let's say it's a $10,000 renovation, material and labor. They'll typically charge like $5,000 on top of that, like 15. So your cost would be $15,000. Okay, these are a lot of times you're really good people to want to work with. Now you lose a little bit of profit, but that's kind of what you're looking for. But what I've been really kind of looking for is people that have been like, they've been a contractor for like 3 years. They just started off really, but they're now starting to get in that transition period where they're starting to understand like renovations. They've got a crew onto their team, but they haven't been doing it forever, but they're starting to get to that point where they can start charging more in prices at that moment in time, but they're just beginning that phase. And I'm trying to snatch those people up and give them a shot on something small first.
Nice.
Use them on a larger transaction, and then we'll expand at that point in time. So I just want to see how they're working on a small deal. Then we'll work on big deals later. And then another thing that we're also looking for is their stability of their own personal finances. Not that I'm asking them about their stability of their own finances, but I do want to ask them about how do they want their draws? Like if they're wanting me to pay 100% of the rehab up front, I already know that they're not financially stable, okay? They're going to take the money, run. Same thing with maybe 50%. If it's a small renovation of like $5,000, let's say it's a $5,000, let's say we're dealing with a mobile home, they should have $5,000 to renovate the property. If they don't have $5,000 and you give them $5,000, they're going to take $2,000, pay their own bills, and next thing you know, they're going to come back to you for another $2,000 in the future. Okay? If they have the ability of doing a renovation for $5,000, then that means they're at least financially stable to fix up everything, and then they get paid on the back end. Now, if it's a larger transaction, let's say it's like a $30,000 renovation, which we do, then what I'll do is I'll give them a little upfront, okay? So that way they get started, and then we'll work it out in draws after they've completed the project. So that way I don't have somebody screwing me and take my money and run at that point in time. But it's just understanding their business, how many people they have on their crew, when are they going to be on the project? Are they going to be onto it all the time? Are they working people all the time on different projects, and you're only going to get somewhat of an individual on a project? How are they wanting their draws? How long have they been in business? Are they insured? Are they bonded? That's really helping us understand whether we're working with the contractors or not.
That's a lot of very good points there. Yes, absolutely. I've heard many investors paying them up front and then getting screwed. You know, that's unfortunately that's part of it many times, and that's a hard lesson learned. But I would agree with you a lot on that. Brandon, I can sit here and listen to you all day. You got a lot to share for sure. We may need to plan for another call.
I'm down with it.
So we're going to break off here in a few minutes, but what would you say to somebody, suggest to somebody new trying to get into any type of mobile home real estate investing?
I always say this, be patient with yourself. Always be patient with yourself. Like, man, I've been doing this 10 years now, countless transactions, hundreds of transactions, and I still feel brand new. So sometimes I feel like I still don't know what I'm talking about, or that I understand this business, and I still feel like I'm learning. And what I always got to remind myself is to be patient, that this is a marathon, not a sprint. That it's just one step at a time. And the biggest battle that you face is really just within. The more that you understand about yourself, and the more that you understand about other people, the more that you'll gain within this business altogether. But my real suggestion is more philosophical, less of like everybody's got probably like, hey, here's a direction, go to a RIA meeting, you know, start putting your market and advertising. But those are all kind of just always the same conversation. But what I would always say is, like, I'd say that this game is definitely a mental game for sure. And I would just say that patience is going to, and I'm not a patient person. I'm a very zealous person. I want the deal now. I want to be able to get it. I want to make money now. And a lot of people are like that. And I get that because you see the numbers and you want to change your financial situation. But ultimately, the best things come in just the same as like if you were growing a tree, it's one seed, and then you're patient with it, and you nurture it, and you love it. This is a business. You need to nurture it, and you need to love it, and you need to love yourself, and you need to enjoy the process. You need to have fun. Be patient with yourself and recognize that it's a marathon, and that you'll continuously keep growing and learning. And in 20 years from now, you may be a multi-millionaire. You may have $10 million, $15 million, $20 million, but you still feel like you're brand new, and there's still so much to learn. And that's the beauty of this business, and you need to respect it and learn it in that aspect. And that would be my suggestion.
Very nice. Yes, sir. Absolutely. As usual, y'all can find me at mobilehomepartner.com. That's my page, or reach out to me directly. But Brandon, if somebody wanted to invest with you or sell you one of their houses, they need to get rid of whatever, how can they reach out to you?
Couple different platforms. So Facebook, I got a personal page that people can reach out to me. It's you're going to put Brandon Diaz, D-I-A-Z, common spelling on Brandon, Memphis, Tennessee, and then I pop up. Just send me a friend request. If you send me a friend request on Facebook, you have to like my stuff. I always say that. Okay, if you're not liking my stuff, you're getting off there, because I only want people that are going to be interacting and having fun. On Instagram, Brandon Diaz 101. I do a lot of my stories on that, and then we also have a YouTube channel. It's called Deals with Diaz. That's Deals with a Z. So instead of an S, Deals with Diaz. And just click on that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And then as projects are coming up, I always put stuff on YouTube, and we're growing that channel as well. So that's where they can reach out to me.
Awesome. Awesome. And what I'm going to do is that when I post this video, I'm going to go ahead and tag you on there on Facebook as well. But I'm going to follow a couple of these channels I didn't know you had. I'm going to jump right on them, and I'll be sure to start liking your stuff. So,
yeah, man.
Brandon, pleasure, man. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Jose, man, you're doing great, man. Thank you, bro.
All right. We'll see.
See you, man.